Hello friends, it's your buddy Nick here with Game with the Guys. This is Spelldexia, we are in Irithyll, and this episode of our in-depth look at Dark Souls 3 is going to be a little bit different from the others. I am actually doing post-commentary in this one, and it's because I made a big mistake. And so, hopefully it'll work out the way that I would like for it to go. Unfortunately, I was having trouble with my microphone, and I didn't get any of my audio from before, so I'm going to do my best with this version of it. And as we're going through here, we are taking a look at these unique-looking hollow dogs. They do not look quite like the hollow dogs of other areas, but they are easily just as vicious. There's a third one hanging out back here, and he actually gives me a little bit of trouble, and honestly, I was a little worried I was going to die, but we're able to get him to bounce off the shield. So in that sense, they are a little bit like the other hollow dogs, but as we pull out the bow here, we get a closer look, and you see these long fingers that they have on their front paws, and their face is much more like a human skull than it is a canine skull. And the overall look of it is almost like lycanthropic, perhaps. And it makes me wonder if this is possibly some beast that is because of using the Pontiff's rings, or maybe it's just an animal that is located in Irithyll, but this is very different from any of the hollowed hounds we'll find in other places. Here's a rusted gold coin, often associated with good fortune and good luck. This guy was not so fortunate, as he was killed off by these hounds, or at least his corpse was eaten by them. As I run off here, I realized that there was one more item that I forgot. This is the kukri back here, or a group of 8 of them, and it's not very clear to me why they would be located here. We do know that a lot of different people started to use these. It wasn't just the people of Carthus, and we aren't really that far from Carthus, so it makes sense for them to be not too far away. And also the fact that they do bleed buildup. And we will see bleed-associated items coming up very soon. And this room is filled with these Irithyllian slaves. And as we saw the ones in the graveyard just a little bit earlier, they have this partial invisibility. And so here I'm showing you a few of the locations of the ones up above that try to ambush you if you are unfortunate enough to walk under them and be struck by them. So I take the time to just knock all of these guys off the rafters. I do leave one up above because that one is a magic user, and it's actually safer to just go up and fight him just face to face. Now I'll come down the stairs and I'll show you how these guys are a little bit different from some of the other Irithyllian slaves. These guys are actually missing the lower half of their legs, and so they don't really have the same movement as some of the other enemies in the area, but they are still fairly dangerous. If you get in close to them, they've got a few different attacks, and you know, they're not going to take it easy on you, so don't take it easy on them. And there is just a huge horde of them here. There is another way around these guys, though it's probably not that much safer route to take, but I will show you that in just a moment. But we have a few varieties of these Irithyllian slaves. We've got the ones down here on the ground, and the standard ones with the knife, and there is the magic using one up above. And we saw a couple of the different moves from that guy, and I'll actually demonstrate its spitting attack a little bit later. Back over here are some blue bug pellets, and in the live commentary that I did and wasn't able to keep, I stumbled over the word or the phrase blue bug pellets many times, so be glad that I'm now taking my time with it. And so we still have a number of these guys to handle here, and they like to hide out in the corners. And so right here I'm going to demonstrate a couple of its attacks. There's the lunge, and then its spitting attack there. Back behind him we have one that isn't hostile at the moment, but if you get close enough, you will wake him up. And up until he started moving there, I wasn't actually able to click on him to select him to fight him. So now at this point we'll go to the higher level of this, looks like a wine storage area. And most of the Irithyllian slaves have been shot down, but I did leave one over around the corner here. Here's the last one. He actually, he's a magic user, but I didn't give him the chance to shoot me with magic, and you shouldn't either if you're coming through this area. We find a shriving stone here, and in the last episode, we talked a little bit about Velka, and I'll get back to that in a moment, but I'm just showing this alternate route here that really doesn't do much. It kind of just takes you to the same location. But the shriving stone, in the sense that it's a drop that is that can be left behind by killing Corvians, is somewhat associated to Velka, and we're seeing a handful of things associated to Velka in the area. And the Irithyllian slaves are the ones that make the blue bug pellets, so it makes sense that they also drop them. Over here in the chest we have Yorshka's spear, and I apologize because I'm drinking water as I'm doing this. I'm trying to not lose my voice. So this treasure gifted to the Yorshka church is enchanted by a soporific spell and was surreptitiously worshipped by Irithyll slaves. As a weapon, it is part spear and part hammer, the former allowing thrusting and the latter allowing strikes. In the previous bonfire we were at was the bonfire called Yorshka Church. And so this treasure was gifted to the Yorshka Church. And it's not very clear if these Irithyllian slaves worship the hammer or the church or Yorshka herself. But we see here that there is that connection. And another connection we can make with Yorshka is back in Dark Souls 1, there's a character named Priscilla. And she actually had the ability to turn invisible. And so we're seeing that these Irithyllian slaves kind of somewhat have a similar ability, and you'll see them just partially invisible, and later on we'll see ones that get completely invisible. And I also wanted to talk about the skill. It's called Pacify. Raise the spear in prayer and temporarily wear down enemy FP with each strike. And so with Pacify, that kind of relates to the fact that it says it has a soporific spell, and that means that it's kind of like a sleep spell or a pacifying spell. So skill Pacify, that makes sense together. All right. So down through the next area here, we will find, well, where that alternate route was going to take us. And I'm sorry to bump the mic there. This just ends up in the same place. Now we see a couple of these Irithyllian slaves here, and we'll just take quick care of them there, and you can see how this one has actually become completely invisible. And then he pops back up and tries to kill us. At that point I was mentioning how the Pontiff rings were making lots of noise, and how they can be somewhat annoying, but that's okay because they're doing their job. And there's a crystal lizard hiding back there that we'll take care of in a moment. Here I'm going to drop down and basically avoid an ambush. And so there's a guy waiting right back here, and to the left we'll hear this one scream, but I kill it quickly enough that the ambush doesn't happen. And this character is very much like the lantern-bearing hollows in the High Wall of Lothric. When it screams out like that, it'll wake up a lot of the other enemies. And I'm showing you here that there are several other enemies that we actually don't see right here. And they don't wake up because I was able to stop the scream in time. So, crisis averted. So it was pretty nice that I was able to show you the scream, and also that you can avoid the ambush. Now if we take a look at the item we just picked up, which is the Blood Gem, a gem-infused titanite, slurped by Irithyll slaves. So that makes it sound like this was some kind of a treat, like they would suck on it like a lollipop or something. But anyway, this is infused to create lacerating weapons, and such weapons inflict lacerating damage, most effective with sharp or spiked weapons. Now, if you follow my channel, you know that I did a great big video on the luck stat and bleed builds. And in that video, I talk a little bit about blood gems and what they do. So basically, I say that they're kind of worthless. And let me come in here to show you. What it will do is it'll actually lower your physical attack power, that base number there. And you'll actually keep your attribute bonus for your strength and your dexterity. But since your physical attack number is lowered, and the attribute bonuses are based on a percentage of that base number, you'll get lower scaling in a sense. You'll get, instead of like the 56 that it shows here, you might get 36 or something, just based on whatever that base number is. It's also going to add on the additional effect of bleed, and that will scale with luck, in the sense that the higher your luck stat, the quicker you'll be able to make enemies bleed. There's one other thing that is really cool that the blood infusion will do, and that is that it will add additional damage when you do induce bleeding. Standard bleeding will take a percentage of your enemy's max hit points, and that will be how much damage you do. So it's going to be different for every enemy. But when you use a blood-infused weapon, it will add 50 additional points just for the infusion, and then 10 extra points for every single level. So this weapon was a level 0, so it's just going to be the 50. And I showed the my twin swords there. Those are a level 7, so you're going to get that 70 bonus for the levels, and then 50 for the infusion itself. But the downside is that you can't buff the weapon, so honestly it makes it kind of worthless, as this guy does a little levitation act there. And we'll look over at these Irithyllian slaves, and they aren't hostile right now. We avoided the ambush by taking that guy out before the scream was complete. This is an illusory wall, and we get a crystal lizard here that'll drop some twinkling titanite. And I come back and I show you just briefly, there's a stairway there, but we're going to take a slightly different route, and I'm going to just avoid any fall damage. And there's an enemy that I can't quite reach, so I have to get a running start to do the plunging attack. And I don't quite kill it, so I have to take another swing at it here. This is what's called a sewer centipede, and we're going to see a lot more of those coming up. And here is a Ring of Sacrifice, another item through Dark Souls 1 very much associated with Velka. Now, in the previous episode, I talked about the Covenant items that in Dark Souls 1 were Covenant items for the Dark Moon Blades, but they were items that were collected because Velka had determined these people to be sinners. This is the Dark Souls 3 version, the Proof of Concord kept. And in Dark Souls 1, Velka was the judge, and the Dark Moon Blades were the executioners. So in that sense, we found basically 4 items that have some connection to Velka. Some fairly loosely, like the Shriving Stone, but the others, like the Ring of Sacrifice, is much more connected, and Corvian's most of all. Here I kind of demonstrate the attacks of the Sewer Centipede, and show you how it opens up its body mouth like the Gaping Dragon from Dark Souls 1. They also kind of remind me of an insect called silverfish, just the way they're designed, so kind of a connection, or a combo of the two. These ones aren't actually hostile until you come up and attack them. They may attack you if you go for this item over here, but I didn't want to find out the hard way. But here we do have a man grub, and he is holding a man grub staff. And as we saw with Klimt anyway, that he gave up his previous staff and took on the man grub staff, and basically gave away his faith in order to worship Rosaria. So he found a new faith. And so this guy seems to have a strong connection to Rosaria, but what would she possibly be doing in Irithyll? Or she, this could be a he actually, but what would a servant of Rosaria be doing in Irithyll? And this isn't the first servant of Rosaria. Creighton was also a servant of Rosaria in the sense that he is one of her fingers. Let's take a look at the spell that I just picked up. This is a strong one called Great Heal. And if I actually choose to pull it up here, that would be great. This is a glorious miracle used by high-ranking clerics, so we can assume that that one was a high-ranking cleric. restores a large amount of hit points for self and those in the vicinity. Only a select few have learned to recite this epic tale in its entirety, but those who do are amply rewarded. So we've seen other healing spells, so it's possible that those ones are kind of snippets of this, and I believe that one actually has a description that kind of follows that same idea. But this spell it's scarce, and so enemies that have it, or NPCs that have it, are obviously high-ranking members of the church. So it's possible that this man grub that we just found is actually Klimt. Now, I think that it's probably one of the ones that we found back near Rosaria, because it doesn't really make sense that this one would try to, come here unless Rosaria sent him. But it's more likely that this man grub was following either Aldrich or the Archdeacon MacDonald. Or it's possible that this guy is a spy. And like I said, maybe Rosaria sent him to spy on Aldrich and MacDonald. As we come back into this area, we notice there's a lot of different alcoves and stuff, but there's not really a lot of other items in this area. But the items that we do find tend to be these green blossoms. And here's one here, and we'll find another in just a moment. So we do our little flipping, and we notice the sewer entrance there, which will go down in just a moment. But I've got a few things to talk about in this area over here. This path almost seems like a dead end. It is very odd the way that it just goes into the wall. But it's also possible that this could be a dam. And we see that there's a large drop-off here, so this could be holding back the water from spilling down below. But the water over here isn't particularly deep, so it's odd that there's a dam. It's possible that that they've attempted to make that livable space after making it a dam. I'm not sure what this area is. If you have any ideas, please let me know. This is the entrance to the Irithyll dungeon. And we'll be going down there later, but in order to continue with one of the quest lines that we're doing, we're going to have to hold off on that. Up here we have the Lothric Castle. This appears to be the back of Farron Keep. And it's hard to say where the undead settlement would be. It would probably be somewhere back over there. This, I'm not entirely sure what this is. I would like to hear your theories. I don't think that this is the Cathedral of the Deep, because we saw that it was located very near a vast ocean, and this doesn't really seem to be near that. There is an image that we see in Dark Souls 1 of a painting that is kind of a building, not really particularly similar to this, but it is up on a cliff, and it kind of just reminded me of that painting. And I showed it to you there. I haven't done that yet, but I will do that in post. Right over here we have a bonfire, so let's take a moment for a rest. And get back all my Estus, get back my focus points. And this area here is nice and dark, but there's not really anything down there. Now down here, on the other hand, that is actually the path to the Irithyll dungeon. But we're going to hold off on that, because, as I mentioned before, the NPC quest line, we want to keep it intact. And if we actually head down in that direction, it will mess with the Grey Rat quest line. So if you start heading down into the Irithyll dungeon before you've killed Pontiff Sullivan, you're going to lose Grey Rat. And I don't recommend it, because he's a nice guy. Right over here, more sewer centipedes. I was like, it's an alliteration. So generally, you can dodge the attacks, and I just did a terrible job there. But that attack isn't too brutal. You can also just block it. This one's going to end up spitting at me when I tried to demonstrate the block of it. So it spits a toxic spittle there, and you see the buildup that I get right there. So there we go. We successfully blocked that big attack, and just take out the centipede after the fact. We find dung pies here. We are in the sewers, so it makes sense to be finding dung in the area. And there's a number of these centipedes, and there's a couple of the dung pies that we'll find in the area. These monsters also have the chance of dropping dung pies. I don't get any to drop it now, but you know, if you really want to farm some dung pies, that's where to do it. These centipedes over here are actually guarding what will be Grey Rat's corpse if you don't complete his quest line. So I suggest that you do, so you don't have to find his corpse there. A few more dung pies, which are very useful, and we will use those a little bit later on. But I mentioned Grey Rat's ashes. These are some other ashes that don't belong to him. These are the excrement-covered ashes. Very fitting that we'd find these in the sewer. So, unclean umbral ash coated with excrement. Perhaps it's possible the handmaid of Firelink Shrine could turn this into a few new things, maybe? Oh, to savor the sweet pungency, but once more. And that quote isn't accredited to anyone, so maybe I should have Googled it. So if you know who said that quote, please let me know in the comments below. But it's disgusting because they're talking about poop in this context. So, I mean, that may be used out of context, but that's okay. The excrement-covered ashes will open up some new items for us. And what it's going to do is some of the items that we're kind of finding in the area. And that's going to be your, you're going to get your dung pies, a new item called the stock dung pie, and then you get your blue bug pellets, and your blooming purple moss clump. And as we move along here, we will run into one of our NPC friends, and he's heavily associated with our Grey Rat questline. And as I smash through these tables, I make reference to a song in the book The Hobbit about smashing plates and whatnot. We find some Estus soup there, but I choose not to drink it at this time because we're just going to get some from Siegvard here. And he's snoozing away like he always is.
Excuse me, I must have dozed off. It's rather warm in here. Well, hasn't it been all too long? It's good to see you. Oh, I seem to have missed my chance, so I, Siegvard of Katarina, offer my deepest gratitude. And a little surprise to go with it.
I like surprises.
It's all yours.
Here we have Emit Force. And this is an item that we actually get from Sieglund in Dark Souls 1. We'll take a look at the spell in just a moment, but it seems to be a reoccurring theme that Katarina Knights like to give us Emit Force. And he had talked about feeling rather warm, and we see that he's sitting by the fire in full armor.
Won't you join me for dinner? I make a fine Estus soup. I've got some stewing right now. Even we undead deserve a little normalcy from time to time. And finally, upon this rendezvous, let us make a toast.
And he gives us some more Siegbrow.
To your valor, my sword, and our sworn duties. Long may the sun shine.
And he talked a little bit about duties, and he'll talk more about that in just a moment. I was trying to pull up toast to toast him, but I didn't have it anywhere near ready. But like I said, he's going to talk about this duty. We have ours to supposedly link the flame, and he's got one that's unique to him. So let's check that out.
Have you heard? Somewhere, hidden right here in Irithyll, is a deep dungeon. And even below that, the profaned capital, home of Yhorm, the reclusive giant lord. That reminds me, I've a grave promise to keep.
And so he gives us a little geography lesson there, and he talks about Yhorm, who we saw in the introduction of the game. And he says that he has a grave promise to keep. So...
Oh, sorry. I'm afraid I've cast a cloud over things. Well, I'm going to have myself a little nap. The only thing to do, really, after a nice toast.
And that the first part of that last section of dialogue is also in reference to his duty. He says it's a grave duty, so it makes it quite depressing. So he, being a jolly character, doesn't want to continue talking about that. And at some point, I'll stop looking around the kitchen, and I will open up my inventory to show you the spell. Just checking out the fire, I suppose. I think I was talking more about the duty that he was talking about. And we'll see more of that quest line as we head further down into the Irithyll dungeon. But we can take a look at Emit Force here. Traditional Miracle of Katarina releases a shockwave in front. The people of lands known for festivity and drink are typically outspoken. One can be sure that they will not bottle their emotions, instead venting anger and the like with confidence. So, the people of Katarina are jolly, like Siegvard himself. So, I mean, is that a stereotype? Is it racist to say that people of Katarina are jolly? Here, this room will remind us of a location in Dark Souls 1. And you can see that there's a prominent painting on the wall there, and we'll talk at length about that in a moment. There's a guy staring at it. He's a Silver Knight. The Silver Knights from Dark Souls 1 were the guardians of the royal family. And many of them followed Gwyn, and they kind of took a different path. But the ones that remained in Anor Londo were there to protect Guinevere and Gwendolyn, but mostly Guinevere, let's be honest. I show you there's an archer up above, and there's actually angles that you can shoot at him where he can't get at you. But at this point, I want to just sneak by everyone and fight him directly rather than with ranged battle. And there's another Silver Knight up here, and I'm just preparing to go sneak up on him rather than just face him head to head. It's better to just sneak around behind him and get a backstab. And obviously that's only attainable if, you are invisible with either the hidden body spell or the obscuring ring. So we saw that it dropped some large Titanite shards, and all of the knights in this area are gonna drop those same shards. And in the previous episode, I just talked about how many shards we're gonna find, and this is several more here. We get some silver armor, some Silver Knight armor here, so we can take a look at that. Armor of the Silver Knights, allegiant to the royals of old. And the royals of old are the old royal family, which would be the gods from Dark Souls 1, Gwyn, Guinevere, and Gwendolyn. It is said that even after the family's passing, the knights continue to watch over their manor and the ruined cathedral. So when it says the family's passing, could that mean that they left? Could that mean that they died? Could it mean that they just fell out of prominence? Really, any one of those things. We don't know that all of them are dead. It's possible that one of them may survive. But it talks about the manor, and there was a room in Anor Londo that had several paintings the way that this one has in it. So what I'm going to do is just take out this knight, and we're going to review some of these paintings. And I know he dropped something very important, and so for those of you that know about it, I'm going to get back to it because it is huge lore significance, and it's probably the most important thing in this episode. As we come and take a look at these paintings, this one is strikingly similar to, well, nothing. We see, it looks like there's a person down at the bottom there, and we've got a snowy area with these strange buildings. It's possible that this might actually be a reference to the DLC, and that's really the only thing that I can pull from this. It could be a section of Irithyll that we never see, but it would be very cool if it was actually from DLC. And speaking of which, this actually looks like an area from DLC from Dark Souls 1, where we meet Hawkeye Goth, and in the ancient time of Irithyll before it fell and became Darkroot Garden. And in Darkroot, we just find crumbles of these buildings, and in Irithyll, we find them a little bit more structurally intact. This woman is a little bit of a mystery to me. It's possible that she is a cleric. It's possible that she is a member of the royal family. There's no real hints on who this is. It's possible it's no one at all. And in Dark Souls 1, some of the images in the manor were actually just pictures taken from, like, Google Images. They were just kind of pictures they thought would look cool up on the walls. The next one, we see a mighty throne. And could this possibly be the kiln of the first fire? It's hard to say, but a prominent but empty throne. Next, we have a cityscape, and I decided to break some furniture because I'm a jerk. Here's a cityscape. It could be Anor Londo, it could be Irithyll. It has kind of this tall, spiry, gothic look to it. This is a painting of Guinevere. We see a very similar painting of Guinevere in Dark Souls 1. Here's an image of that, and you can kind of see them side by side there. This is, though it has a different frame, this is very much the same image. And this one here is old and beat up. So it's possible that it somehow survived from back then to here. And it's very interesting that the Silver Knight was looking at this painting, because it's holding a divine blessing. So let me get serious for a moment. This is when I start talking some serious lore stuff. So, I know what you're thinking. Divine blessing. This is proof that Guinevere is the Queen of Lothric. Well, I don't believe that. I don't think she was. Let's take a look at the divine blessing. Holy water blessed by the Queen of Lothric. Okay, so Dark Souls 3 divine blessing related to the Queen of Lothric. Got it. The Queen of Lothric, married to the former king Osiris. Okay, easy. That's all fine and well so far. Was initially revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty, and I said that in a particular way. I'll get back to that in just a moment. After giving birth to Ocelot, her youngest, she quietly disappeared. Now, it never really says the timeline here. She could have given birth to Ocelot and then left 10 years later. She could have left a day later. She could have left a century later. The Queen of Lothric, we can assume, is part of the royal bloodline. Well, I guess we really can't assume that. But I'm going to assume that she's part of the bloodline that leads back to Gwyn and Guinevere. So, you know, they're gods. And it's possible the Queen of Lothric is a goddess herself, but she's not. She could be a demigod, though. And so it's possible that she had a rather long lifespan. And why do I think that she wasn't a goddess? Well, let's take a look at the description of this same item, but from the Japanese version of the game. The original statements are from the Japanese version of the game, and this is kind of one translation. Here is a literal translation. Holy water said to have been blessed by the Queen of Lothric. And in the Japanese descriptions, a lot of times they'll say, said to have been. Just think of it as literally, holy water blessed by the Queen of Lothric. She was the wife to the previous king Osiris, and even, here's the key word here, and even compared to a goddess of fertility and bounty. She is said to have disappeared after giving birth to her youngest child, Ocelot. And the way they say disappeared, the intention there is actually that she kind of left on her own accord. But the literal words there are, she even compared to a goddess. In Dark Souls 3, we see it says initially revered as a goddess. That's a simile there. So she's not a goddess. She is thought of like a goddess. And the reason why we take such a deep look at this, a lot of people make the connection that the Queen of Lothric is Guinevere because of the description of this same item from Dark Souls 1. holy water from goddess Guinevere. Notice Guinevere, goddess, firmly goddess, fully restores HP, yada, yada, yada. The goddess of sunlight, Guinevere, daughter of the great lord of sunlight, Gwyn, is cherished by all as the symbol of bounty and fertility. So in the Dark Souls 1 description, it is firm that she is a goddess. And in Dark Souls 3, it says that she was revered as a goddess, or compares to a goddess, depending on which translation you're looking at. So, is she Guinevere? I do not think so. I don't think so at all. But she does somehow resemble her in looks or in spirit or something like that. We'll see more clues on who this possible Queen of Lothric might be. And there's just so much more going on here. One more point I wanted to make about this, because this is so important. The way that it used revered as. This reminds me most of ancient Egypt, where you find the pharaohs that were not actually gods, but they were revered as gods. So this could be a very similar circumstance. These vases have frost damage that they can do to you, but you can knock them out and not have to worry about it. Here I just demonstrate the frost damage just to show you, but from a distance you can knock them out and get through unharmed. Now up here we've got 3 chests. The first one here is another Divine Blessing, and we've already talked about that ad nauseum, so we can move on. The next one we have is an item related to Anor Londo, Smo's Great Hammer. Smo was one of the most ferocious bosses from Dark Souls 1. He and his friend that we will talk about in just a moment. So this item says, a twisted great hammer associated with Smo, the last knight to remain at his post, guarding the ruined cathedral. Now, when we meet him, he is with another knight. So this is kind of an interesting sentence here that says that he was the last one there, signifying that maybe Ornstein wasn't there anymore. Let's move on. Restores HP while attacking, and that's going to restore 2 hit points per hit. A carryover from Smo's past is an executioner. Not only was he an executioner, he was also a cannibal. That is not important here. What's important is that he was an executioner. And we remember from the executioner's greatsword that that also had a kind of leeching ability. That would regain focus points for you, while this one regains hit points for you. And when there is Smo, there is also Ornstein. And I was very obviously still talking about Smo here, but now it is time to talk about Ornstein. So we find items that are associated with both of them right next to each other, the way that they were in Anor Londo. The Leo ring has a lion on it, of course, and the Hawk ring has a hawk. We'll find that the 4 Knights of Gwyn all have animal symbols on their rings. So this ring is associated with Dragon Slayer Ornstein. This strengthens thrust weapon counterattacks. So if a guy's trying to hit you and you hit him instead and you hear that dong noise, that's a counterattack. And this will strengthen those of spears, like what Ornstein used, of rapiers or poking swords or the stab of a straight sword, and also arrows. So keep that in mind. But this won't help out with riposte or backstab or riposte. I never remember which way to pronounce that. So Ornstein was the first knight of the sun's eldest born, and his crossbeard is said to have pierced scales made of stone. And those scales made of stone mean the dragons, the everlasting dragons from the lore of Dark Souls 1. And so we see here the first knight of the sun's eldest born. This might give us a hint onto that questionable remark in Smo's Great Hammer as, maybe what happened to Ornstein. And that's something that we'll discuss much later on in this playthrough. But at this point, we now have to get to a very deadly stretch of this level. And I just take one last glance at the Silver Knights and I say good riddance. Out here, we're heading up kind of the back pathway of Irithyll, and there's a couple little nooks and crannies, but they don't have any items there, so don't waste your time. As we come up here, there are various snipers, and there are also these dogs. And when there's multiple of them attacking at once, they're very dangerous. We're also getting invaded by the Pale Shade of Londo. So, if you're in good standing with Yuria, you will not have this encounter. If you have upset Yuria, or like I did, I killed her, then you will have this encounter. And I honestly think that this Phantom NPC is one of the more difficult ones that you will face. And that's because she has, or he, not entirely sure that it's a male or a female, but we see these dark magics that are ranged. We see poison throwing knives. We see very fast claw weapons that can attack. So the Pale Shade has a variety of attacks in its arsenal. So it can be very difficult to determine which way to come about fighting it. And the method that I use here is basically the same method that I used with Creighton. And that's really to try to bait at an attack and then get in 2 swipes and then back off. And then try to bait an attack and come in 2 swipes and back off, or just kill them. So, the Pale Shade has died. I get a little bit more Estus back. And at this point, if you didn't get the mannequin claws from the Pale Shade back in Fair and Keep, you would get them now. Here I'm switching over to using the Hawk Ring, and that's because I want to outsnipe the snipers. So we'll see one here in this little smoky-looking head, and with the Hawk Ring, I get better damage. And you see me adjusting to where I was standing so that I could shoot further than its magic could reach, and it dissipates right in front of me. Now there's several of these snipers, and I just use the same method to attack them from greater range than they can hit me. I'm a little bit too close for this one. This attack will hit me. Oh, no it didn't. I think it's later on I get hit by one. But you can see how using the Hawk Ring there is very helpful. You can still hit those guys from a distance without the Hawk Ring, but you're going to do far less damage, and you're going to have to probably adjust for an arc on your bow. And right here, I just wanted to point out this statue. It is one that we've seen before. It's one of the more common ones in the area, but we're seeing a few more of these statues hanging out again. Here we have a couple more of these dogs, so I wanted to just kind of draw them out so I could face them without having to also deal with the snipers. There are a couple more snipers. There is one more dog. So here, this is the one that hits me. I was trying to hide behind this this pillar here and shoot at it, but it's actually the next sniper that you can hide behind obstructions and get safe shots at. There's one more sniper up there, and before I attack it, I want to take out this final dog here. And we'll actually see that you can use this statue here to block out its shots while you can safely fire back at it. Well, if you line yourself up right. I didn't do so there. But its magic will just continue to hit the hand of the statue and will not hit us. And we can take that guy out. Here's another one of these statues that we've seen very frequently. Another one that resembles this monarch. And that little basin up front is often used in real life. You would put probably like holy water there. So this might be signifying that this is not only a queen-like monarch, but also a woman of faith. And around here we are able to open up a shortcut. This will take us back to Yorska's church. So I just want to take this elevator up and open up this door. In case you die, then you have another chance to get back to this area quickly. I just defined a shortcut. Sorry about that. But Yorska's church was right back over there. But let's go ahead and continue on in this area. And we're going to find some items hanging out over here. More Titanite. Like I said in the previous episode, there's lots of large Titanite shards here. but you shouldn't complain about getting upgrade materials. There's not something hiding back there, even though it looks like there should be. Here I actually meant to top off my magic. There we go, because this next room has a very dangerous ambush in it. And it's very easy to avoid. If you go straight through the door, you're gonna get jumped. But you can do some jumping of yourself and come down here. I used Spook to negate any damage, but you really don't take very much damage at all if you jump down that way. So up here, we're going to find part of the ambush, and part of the reason why it's so difficult. Up here, we have a couple of snipers. And these guys, if we entered the room, they would be shooting these solar arrows at us as we would be down below attempting to fight the other beasts. And that's a closer look at these crawling Irithyllian slaves. They're actually missing their legs from the knee down. I wish I still had the reaction of me getting hit by that guy. I had no clue he was coming, and I probably screamed like a small child. We see several of these Irithyllian slaves hanging out here, and they would be quite a nuisance if we weren't coming from behind them and getting the jump on them instead. Also, these are ones that can turn completely invisible, as we'll see that this one will come out and attack me. And a second one. So, even though we had a little difficulty there, we were able to get through the ambush, and all of that for just some blue bug pellets. Not worth it. So at this point, let's switch our rings back, because I'm not going to be doing any long-range shooting at this point. I will be doing some shooting in just a moment here, as we take a look at this item that appears to be bricked in onto this little ledge. But we can shoot this area and show that it is an illusory wall. So we've seen a few of those here, and illusory walls were no stranger in Anor Londo either. So the relation of the two is building up. This area very much is either a rebuilding of Anor Londo or actually suburbs of Anor Londo. And this guy is actually very dangerous, and his blade does some good range. It has very quick attacks to it. And I usually fight him on the stairs from lower ground, because that way some of his attacks will go over your head, and you can be a little bit more safe. If you are using a weapon that can do a guard break attack, the kick attack, it's much easier to fight these guys. Instead, I'm having to initiate contact and getting them to attack me instead. This is the fog gate for Pontiff Sullivan, and we'll be checking that out in the next episode. We still have a lot to do here before we go through. And when you're fighting Pontiff Sullivan, you actually have 3 choices of summons that you can use. This one is the Londor Pale Shade. If you're in good standings with Yuria, you can summon the Pale Shade. Here I'm showing this this statue off again. We've seen it before, and we're seeing these monarch queens again. This is Blackhand Goddard, the second of the 3 that are available. You can take 2 of the 3, or you can use a dried finger and probably take all 3 in. But Goddard is... his locations are very strategic. So if you remember, we saw one back at Fair and Keep, and we're seeing one outside of Pontiff Sullivan's house, his location. So the third is Anri here, and it makes sense because Anri hates Aldrich, and Sullivan is standing in the way. But Goddard's locations, they kind of have a theme to them, and we'll talk about that when we meet. When we, I don't want to say meet, when we find all of his locations. So through there is the big boss man, and we have a few more guys down below here, but at this point I want to really focus in on this statue, because we're able to see something on this statue that we couldn't see before. This statue, like I said, is a monarch, is a queen. We saw the basin where it looks like she's probably someone of faith, but she's also not wearing any shoes. And I've looked around through the game, and I don't think that I found any other statues that are barefoot like this. And in imagery of, kind of the high fantasy type, European style of royalty, you don't really see the idea of not wearing any shoes. So that's kind of a unique thing there. Though being shoeless is sometimes seen with like Egyptian deities, not really a European thing. This is the gate I talked about in the previous episode. We can now get from Yorshka's church to the boss room. And we're seeing a few of these Pontiff Knights and the Fire Witch there making the rounds. And speaking of Fire Witches, we're going to get a jump on this guy over here. So this one is kind of waiting for an ambush as I show the path back to Yorshka's church. But we can just jump down and get some quick hits, kind of stunning him for long enough that we can polish this enemy off. And we see that it just kind of dissipates. We got some souls here, and we'll make our way back up because there are some items that we can only get from up above. But first, got to get rid of this Pontiff Knight. And you'll see that it was shooting the deep soul at me, and I was trying to dodge it, but failed miserably. And really just did a poor job with this Pontiff Knight. I was trying to initiate attacks there so that I could dodge its attacks, and I ended up just lucking out and timing that one just right, just to hit it. So we come back up here because there is a very important item that you must drop down from here to collect. And you can see it there. Now, this is the Ring of the Sun's Firstborn. So this item, if we take a look in here, is the Ring of the Sun's Firstborn, who inherited the light of Gwyn, the First Lord. So, yeah, the oldest son here. Inheritance. Yeah, important in these royals and whatnot. But if we move on, the Sun's Firstborn was once a god of war, until he was stripped of his stature as punishment for his foolishness. No wonder his very name has slipped from the annals of history. So we don't know what his foolishness was at this point. We can speculate when we get more evidence of this, but it's never just directly said. But what I do want to mention is that in a lot of civilizations, a lot of societies, having your name taken from you is considered a fate worse than death. So whatever he did was so bad that they didn't kill him. Instead, they took the thing most valuable from him, and they took his name, and they took his legacy. And so what this item will actually do, as far as the usefulness in this game, is it will boost your offensive miracles by 20%, and that's going to be things like your emit force, or gnaw, or lightning, your lightning bolts, stuff like that. Those are going to be boosted by 20%. And looking back at this first line here, as I immediately turn it off there, I think that it actually is a small hint at who the Queen of Lothric is. And I'll get more into that later, but first we have to take a look at this lightning gem. Found in the aftermath of dragon hunts, which makes a lot of sense because we know that dragons are weak to lightning. Used in infusion to create lightning weapons. Lightning weapons inflict lightning damage and scale with faith. So I've talked about the split damage types many times. This is going to be one that, like it says, does lightning damage and scales with faith. So you're going to have a split damage. You're still going to have some physical, and that will still scale with strength and dexterity. But your base number for that is going to be much smaller. So you're going to get smaller physical scaling. But then you add on the lightning damage, which will scale with faith. And it tends to have kind of a high scaling number. A's, B's, S's, depending on the weapon type. And so with that, you're doing your lightning damage, but you can no longer buff items that are infused like that. We get the magic clutch ring here. A ring depicting a hand grasping a blue stone. If we continue reading, we'll see that this follows the same pattern as the other clutch rings, talking about Londo and yada, yada, yada. So kind of looking at what it does here, it takes away your absorption, which is actually a percentage number, the way that that works. It takes about 10% away. There's kind of some fiddling with the number here and there, but it tends to take away 10% of your physical absorption, but you get a boost of 15% to your magic damage. And that is all magic damage. That means your soul spears, your, Farron soul swords, all of those, and also any type of infusement that you've done on a weapon, or your magic buff, or also even items that have innate magic abilities on them. So it is very powerful, but it comes with great cost there. And as we move along down here, we'll see many more statues. These ones appear to be the children that we saw before. And we kind of talked about how Irithyll is like a suburb or just a modern expansion of Anor Londo. And the people of Anor Londo were either deities, there were giants, but one way or another they were larger than humans. And so we're seeing that these children, even the smallest of them, are at least as tall as Speldexia. And so this may be what the children of Irithyll look like. And along with the Outrider Knights and the Pontiff Knights that we saw, all much taller than the player character. We're seeing again these male cleric here. This one holding a staff. The other had a flame. Not saying it's the profane flame, because honestly, it looks more like soft serve. But we are seeing that imagery of these clerics next to a group of children. So, I mean, you could go the gross route and think about those controversies, but it could mean something very different, or it, just could be a coincidence. But at this point, it is time to head back to Firelink Shrine. I'm running out of time, and there's too much lore to talk about with Pontiff Sullivan to talk about it next time. That I'll have to talk about it next time. And I did just want to bump the mic by accident. I did just want to show that that I killed the pilgrim here, because that is a huge, huge important thing for Henri's quest line, and I wanted to be sure that I was doing it correctly. So if you want to follow Henri's quest line the good way, then you need to kill the pilgrim. But if you want to follow Henri's quest line the bad way, then don't kill the pilgrim. And what we're doing here, I cannot remember, other than it's time to talk to her and give her ash.
Gracious, passing fine ash thou'st given.
Disgusting.
Let this ash bestow nourishment.
Disgusting again.
I only hope these new wares content thee.
So those words take on all new meaning with this umbral ash, because it is covered in poop. And the image of it just shows poop all over this hand. And so she talks about passing, like you would, pass your bowels, or nourishment, like hopefully it nourished you before you passed your bowels. The only new item that we're getting from here is the stock dung pie. It works in a similar sense to dung pies, but the mechanic is quite different. And I'll buy a couple so I can show you, but if we look at it, it actually has some flies and some beetles on it. This is dried fecal waste material marked by a long plant stalk that was not properly digested. Disgusting. Throw behind it enemies to inflict toxin buildup, but also ups your own toxicity, and I'll demonstrate that. Strictly speaking, this consists of different material than the dung pie, but waste is waste, no sense in splitting hairs. That is all very disgusting, but, gotta have a little humor with this stuff. So I'm going to grab a couple of these and kind of demonstrate how they work.
Ashen One, be sure to bring more.
Bring more. So as we take a look over here, Grey Rat is gone. He is sacking Irithyll, so he's right where he's supposed to be. And if you are attempting to do Grey Rat's questline with Patches here, he should already be gone, but I was just testing to see if he would do the dialogue, and he's not going to do it because I decided to go the other direction with the questline. So as we come out here, I'm just going to check this tree to see if it dropped a Seed of Giants, because I was invaded by a red phantom, so it's worth taking a look. But first, we can kind of see how you can just run and you just drop that dung pie behind you. So if you have someone chasing after you, you can drop that and try to build up their toxin. But you see that it comes with the penalty of building up toxin on yourself. Obviously, the toxin you're doing to the enemy is going to be far, far more than you're doing to yourself, but it still has a little bit of a danger to it. And at this point, I will grab a couple of levels here.
Very well. Then touch the take no.
And a little bit of this. Nope. A little of this. Maybe? So at this point, I'll just say thank you for watching. If you want to know what's going on in my gaming world, you can always head over to GameWithTheGuys.com. I have a lot more of my notes up on there than I have just spoken here. I've been pretty bad about posting the notes lately, but I'll do my best to get that all up. And if you're enjoying this episode, if you're enjoying this playthrough, please hit that like button, because that always really helps me out. And I always really want to talk lore with you guys. And this episode was a big one for lore, especially when it comes to the Queen of Lothric and what her identity might be. As I said before, I am a firm believer that it is not Guinevere. And so if you have any theories, I would love to hear that. But I'll be showing evidence on who I believe it to be. And I think that some of the stuff that we saw today is starting to point in the direction of who it might be. So we will talk about that in the future. But I obviously had a lot more to say about all of that stuff just now than I do in post. So at this point, I will just say thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.